All right, everybody, welcome back to the #1 television program in the history of the entire universe. I am Brian Lee Durfee, author of The Forgetting Moon, The Blackest Heart, and The Lonesome Crown. All three books published by Simon & Schuster's Saga Press. Today I'm going to be reviewing Chung Kuo, The Middle Kingdom, book #1 in the Chung Kuo series by David Wingrove. I don't know if I'm pronouncing Chung Kuo correctly at all, so forgive me, but that's just the way I'm going to pronounce it for the rest of the video. If it's wrong, it's wrong. There's nothing I can do about it. Anyway, this is a little-known fantasy series of 7 books that came out in the early 1990s that I just devoured back then. I loved them. To me, for a period of time, this was the greatest science fiction saga on the planet. Thing was it was, even back then, it flew under the radar. Nobody really even knows about it to this day. And even back then, it kind of flew under the radar. But I'm telling you, man, people were missing out on one of the greatest science fiction epics ever told. This is the science fiction equivalent of Game of Thrones, and I am not just making that up. Anybody that's read this knows what I'm talking about, okay? Now, this is a review of book 1. I will try to review each book through, the years to come. I am rereading these. I read them all twice in the 1990s when they first came out. Haven't touched them since, so this is a reread, and it's opening my eyes once again to the brilliance of this saga. Book 1 came out in 1990. Like I said, it's called Chung Kuo, The Middle Kingdom. We've got the entire set right here. So you got the entire set. Every single one of them has a cover that's sort of got, this little logo on it, this little kind of a design, this Chung Kuo sort of design. I think the series is called, I don't know what the hell the series is called. Chung Kuo Book 2, yeah, it's just Chung Kuo. Each one has an illustration. I love graphic design and cover illustration. So, Jim Burns did the illustration for every single book. Not only that, but most of the books have like a kind of a fold-out illustration. And then every single book, and this is needed, it's got a vast character list. It's got a vast character list and like a history, like a glossary and a history, much like Dune or in Lord of the Rings, a list of all the characters and a little description of each character, which is really helpful because I said there's a lot of characters in this saga and a lot of things happening, and having these lists right up front is good to keep track of everything that's going on in this saga. And so we're going to start just with the world building. Before we get to characters, we're going to start just with the world building. And the world building starts off with a bang in this book, just right from the jump. The book, we find out, takes place between, the years 2190, so a couple hundred years from now, and 2203. So this book takes place between the span of about 13 years. And each book, this is a saga of, most of the characters follow through, but you see them from kids. Some of the characters start out as kids and young adults, and we get to see their progression throughout the series as to the time they become, older adults. That's what I'm saying. Right from the beginning, we meet Chen, Chen, and Jian, Gyan, and they are two assassins, and we see the city through their eyes. Now, the city is interesting. The cities in this book, so just to describe the background of what's going on in the years 2190 on our planet. We all still live on the planet, but the population has exploded. There's not enough room for people, so the government, which is all run by the Chinese. Every government on every continent is run by the Chinese. It is a global Chinese government. And each one of the noble houses of the Chinese leaders runs one of the continents. Like there's a noble house that runs the cities of America, and one of the cities of England and Russia and China, Australia. Oh, you get it. Now the thing is so many people on a lot of these on every single continent, they've built these cities that are just big, massive buildings that cover hundreds and thousands of square miles. Just one big building, and and each continent has these things on them, and they are like 200, 300 stories high, and all the people live inside of them. Nobody lives out in the wilderness. Nobody lives in, very few wildernesses even left. I think the Swiss Alps are still around, but all these cities are built on these stilts, like these big, massive stilts, and they're built up high. So they're built above the landscape, and they just soar to 300, 400 stories high. And that's where the people live. And of course, the aristocrats, the rich people, the people that are well-to-do live towards the top, you know. And as people's economic status towards the floor, you know, the rich people, they never even venture down into some of the lower levels because it gets pretty sketchy down there. And so we learn all of this in the first, couple 20, 30 pages as these two assassins, Chen and Jian, sort of navigate their way through one of these cities. And it's the city that is on the island of Great Britain, okay? And it covers the whole island, right? And they're on a mission, and so they have to go through all these different levels of the city. And that's a good way of David Wingrove of just introducing us to the landscape that we're going to be in for the next 8 books, all right? 7 books, whatever. And it's crazy. Aristocrats live up top. Up above, even beyond these cities, in outer space, there's orbits, starships and space stations orbit the Earth, and people can even live up there. Now, we haven't gone beyond our solar system in this book yet. I mean, we haven't ventured out and met alien creatures, and we're still just stuck to Earth. That's why we've had to build these big cities. These cities are wild, and there's a class system, and the Chinese sort of rule over it as kind of the hierarchy. And there's still industry, there's still big tech corporations, there's still workers. Everybody seems to have a job. There's very few people that aren't really working, unless you get to the really lower levels of the city where nobody really goes or cares about anyway. Then crime and death and depravity are pretty high, and it's kind of scummy and gross. And then even under that, like I said, these cities are built on stilts. So even under that, you've got people that still live on the landscape below the city. There's like the underneath, and people still lived in it, and they're like real primitive people. And every once in a while throughout the saga, we have characters that go down underneath and under where the stilts and all that stuff. Okay, and there's like I said, there's a few areas of these continents that are not covered up by these big massive cities where there once in a while you'll see some people out in a pastoral farm living, and we get a few characters that come from that kind of setting too. Anyway, let's talk about the characters. Well, I did a crapola job of describing all of that, but let's read the book. I'm not going to read the book for you here. Let's read the back of the book. Okay, Chung Kuo. Okay, the year is 2190. China has once again become a world unto itself, and this time its only boundary is space. Chung Kuo, the world is city Earth, ruled by the 7. China's new kings, beautiful, controlled, sensual. This high-tech society is rushing toward war between the forces of the West and the East, between the rebels who hunger for change and the overlords who demand stability, between the very powers of darkness and light. It will be an era of violent conflagration destined to expose the basest elements of human nature and the highest dreams. Chung Kuo, an epic that draws us into an alternative world so real, so complete, that we become denizens of the new Middle Kingdom, touched by the longings we never imagined, driven by forces as ancient as man's first breath. And this thing, when I say this has got some of the expansive, mind-blowing, science fiction type world building of Asimov's Foundation, I am not making that up. It's got space opera elements. It's got everything that Game of Thrones has. People vying for power from every angle of this world that's been created. From the lower levels, from people underneath the cities, to people on the lower levels of the cities, to the middle levels of the cities, to the upper crust of the cities, people that run the big biotech companies and the big computer companies, the Chinese aristocrats, the 7 families that rule over these continents. All of them are at play. All of them are come into play to who's going to sit the Game of Thrones, who's going to sit the Iron Throne. It's not called the Iron Throne here, though, but it is kind of like a throne, as you can see. And it's such a magical creation of science fiction brilliance. I can't get over how awesome these are. And so I will just go through like one of the character lists here, so we can give you an idea of what kind of characters to expect. So, there's Soren Berdichev. He's one of the main characters. He's the owner of the giant Simfac Corporation, which specializes in entertainment and communications. He wants to... He's pressing for change to the edict of technological control and freedom from the tyranny of the Seven. So the ruling seven Chinese overlords, the warlords and whatever, they kind of control the media, the tech. It's kind of like if Facebook and YouTube and everything, how they, they don't let people say certain things. Anyway, I just got demonetized by saying that. Okay. Howard DeVore is another character. He's a major in one of the royal family's security forces, and he turns out to be sort of the antagonist of this book, where he's just kind of like, he's sticking his nose in everything and trying to get a war going. And then in the subsequent books, he becomes a real baddie. Hans Ebert, he's the son of Klaus Ebert, the vast. He's heir to another very big corporation, and he's got his hands in the middle of things. Then we've got Fei Yen. She's the daughter of one of the noble lords, and she's known as Flying Swallow. She's actually kind of like well, I won't tell you, but she's kind of got a secret. Like, she's pretty a badass girl. And then there's Qin Li Han, the eldest son of one of the ruling classes. Li Shaitung, he's he's the ruler of the European big huge city. And then Gregor Carr, he's born down in the lower levels. He's kind of he's trained to be a blood, which is sort of a gladiator-like fighter. We got all kinds of stuff going on in this book. Peter Lehman, senior representative from Northern Europe. Ben Shepherd, he's like a young boy that kind of grows up on a pastoral little farm, and in the southwest of England, and idyllic. So there, like, even though there are these big cities, there are still areas of the world that are kind of like left untouched, and so we get to see kind of what the people that live in those areas think of this whole, because they can see the big cities in the distance, And then there's Kim Ward, and Kim Ward is one of the people that grew up in the darkness underneath one of the cities, underneath the stilts. Like, you can imagine a city that's 1,000 miles, a 300, 400 story city that's 1,000 miles wide in each direction. And if you're born underneath it in the middle, you're going to know nothing but darkness and just weirdness. I mean, you're going to know what that thing is up above you. And then people kind of come down. And Kim Ward is sort of the Stephen King-ish character in the book. He's got a little bit of maybe The Shining going on with him, like a little bit of a supernatural twist to this character. Like I said, this is just a handful of probably the 50 or some odd characters you're going to follow through this story. And we've got people that are descendants of the Kennedys that come in later on in the book, and they're vying for power because they want the United States again to be a bigger deal than what it is. But book one sets up kind of all of this drama and gets us rooted in all of the characters and what might be coming down the road. And just like Game of Thrones, it is just people stabbing each other in the back nonstop. And not all of your favorite characters are going to make it through even book number one. I'm telling you that right now. I just love this series. Book number one gets a 10 out of 10. I remember reading it for the first time when I was young, back in 1990, and just being blown away, thinking, oh my God, this is the best science fiction I've ever read. Oh my gosh. But I had, and since then I've read a lot of stuff that's equal to this. And so anyway, 10 out of 10.